So we got a special episode today, eh?
Yeah, so this is going to be a bit of a commemorative episode. For episode 125, we have a special episode, and we are saying farewell to Trevor and Vince here. The 2.0 Air the Substance is coming to a close here. We've got an episode just kind of celebrating this era, celebrating our time together as co-hosts, honoring Vincent, honoring Trevor. Looking back at the time, you're going to hear some audio here from some former guests. Got an interview with Trevor and myself here. Just kind of looking back, acknowledging what we did, and kind of talking about the future. Listeners who enjoyed and benefited from our era, I think we would just like to join them in just marking this occasion before we go forward, because we don't want to be like, well, Trevor's gone, Vince is gone, we're going to keep challenging on. Hopefully, we will go on without too much of a hiccup, but just wanted to kind of mark this time, look back, and wanted to do that with you guys.
Awesome. Well, man, I enjoyed this interview, and I hope the listeners have a good time with it as well, and are super excited for whatever's next for the substance. Enjoy.
Vincent, this is Kyle Strobel, brother. I am thankful that we have had our paths connect. You got to love that podcasting brings folks together that might not normally kind of cross paths. And it has been a blessing to get to know you and to interact with you and to hear your heart and all the Lord has for you. And I pray that this next season for you will be a particularly fruitful one, that you would be growing and that you would be filled with the Spirit as you seek Him. When I think of you and I think of our conversations, I just think of your heart for questions about power, questions about what it means to be faithful to our Lord. May you continually ask these questions. May you continually seek to know and understand, what does it really look like, not just theoretically, but practically, that His power is made perfect in our weakness. May the grace of the Lord be with you, brother. I hope that this is a good season you're entering into. I know that kind of leaving this behind will be difficult. I know how much your heart is in it. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord have His face shine upon you, and may He be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you, and may He give you peace. Bless you, brother. I hope this is a blessing and an encouragement to you. Peace to you, my friend.
Hey, Substance guys. This is Courtney Ellis. You had me on your podcast a while back to talk about one of my books, and it was such a delight to be with you. I'm just calling to wish Trevor and Vince the best in their future endeavors. I'm so glad Substance is going to carry on, and I wish Phil the best, too, in carrying the torch. But thank you for the work that you do, the way that you are a faithful Christian witness that seeks to have really deep, thoughtful conversations about topics as light as pop culture and as deep as theology. I'm grateful for the work that you do, and I'm excited to keep listening.
You've landed on The Substance, a podcast aimed at being biblical, thoughtful, and human. Join us every other week as we engage the culture without the culture war. I'm your host, Trevor Aiken, joined here by my lifelong friend and co-host, Philip. How's it going, man?
Hey, man. How's it going, buddy?
It's going pretty good. Back here, recording again.
Back here.
With you. It's pretty exciting. And welcome to The Substance. Friends, if you're new here, if this is your first time.
This would be a wild first episode.
This would be a wild first episode. Honestly, like, maybe a good summary in ways of things.
That's true.
Based on how we're going to be looking at stuff. But yeah, probably as you'll hear in this episode, we're a Christian variety show. Every other week, we talk for an hour or so about stuff related to Christianity, culture, arts. We've got guests on all the time. Some of my favorite previous guests include Kyle Strobel, Ethan McCauley, Jamar Tisby, many others. I mean, I enjoyed so many of the guests, but those are the top ones that come to mind for me. We've been doing this for a minute.
Yeah, dude. I just checked the feed to see when. January of 2019. Yeah. So, bro, that's like
it's been a fun ride.
4 years and change with that year and a half gap that we addressed
for sure, for sure
previously. But
Yes.
Been doing it a long time.
Absolutely, yeah.
120 some episodes, bud. And like,
who knows how many shout outs? Holy cow.
we've known each other for our whole lives. We've had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of conversations, but we've done over 100 of these, over 125 of these.
Structured, recorded conversations intended for public consumption in some way.
Yeah, well produced. From time to time we've had paid advertisers. We have an audience who shares it. Some of them who support us with their dollars, not just with their ears. It's pretty cool.
I think some of the support, especially like just unbidden people on Instagram or Twitter shouting out episodes that we've done as good resources for folks, things like that.
That's the best.
That's always been super encouraging. I mean, and also like some of the loyal just people close to our lives who have even in like moments of strong disagreement with us, continue to listen, continue to come back, continue to interact, and that's been really encouraging too.
And who show us love. I got a text the other day, and this is cool too. This is every now and then I'm like, are people really listening? Are we really helping people? Like, are we really adding something of value? And then like the other day, we published a new episode, and I got a text at like 10 o'clock at night from one of my buddies from college saying like, hey man, like it's really great to listen, and like I really appreciate it. It's encouraging. And I'm like,
that's so cool.
Well, shoot, like okay. I mean, I have a great time doing most of these, but at a certain point, like these are awesome and I love them. But I mean, at a certain point, it becomes like not only fun, but a commitment.
Yeah.
And if whenever I'm kind of assessing like my time and my efforts and my energies, like the podcast is something I think about nearly every day of the week.
Right.
And I'm just going like, okay. But then like when we get that feedback, it's like, you know what, like I'm really glad that it's never been just a vanity project. So
no, not at all.
I'm glad for whatever way we can encourage the body.
Yeah. And I'm glad for whatever way that I have encouraged the body, hopefully through this medium.
So yeah, I don't know what we're going to end up titling the show, if we're going to be cute or we're just going to be straightforward with it. But Trevor mentioned earlier, we're a Christian variety show. We have several different formats. We have interviews. We have substantive media where we look at books or films, or we do long forms or short form topics. But today is a special format, one that
it's a one-off.
We've never done this one before. So this is Trevor's farewell from the Substance.
It's a one-off episode for one host heading off.
Heading off, man. It's been a long time.
It has been. It's been good.
We've done a lot with the show. What are your I don't know. We didn't want to structure this because it's like, well, what order are we gonna ask what questions? But you want to maybe kind of walk the audience through, and just like me and you checks, like we've talked about this before, but kind of your decision-making process and kind of where your life is at right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think back to when we started the show, we were in a transition point in our lives, right? Like it was during COVID. We had just switched up churches that brought us new ministry opportunities, new relationships, and one new opportunity in the middle of it was the chance to jump back into the podcast and jump back into some topics that were really meaningful. We had started a substantive conversation, I hope, around some of these things. Me and you had started talking about stuff, recorded some of our first episodes in 2018. Even back then, we're talking on issues of racial justice and things like that. And man, in the middle of 2020 and even on into 21, those things were really pertinent. And it was a time where me and Philip, I don't know, the listeners might know, but like we've lived our lives, you know, in a way like devoted to ministry in the church. And that's always been something that we've had as like a thing that we volunteer our time for and really pour into, because discipleship was poured into us. You can see a previous episode on that. And
that's even why we had the 1.5-year break, frankly, was because of our commitment to our responsibilities and roles in our local church at that time.
100%. Exactly. So I think in having that time where, you know, we were in a transitional period and it was downtime, but we had, you know, we were having these conversations and biblical reflections on things going on in the culture, and the Substance was a way to engage with people out there with that who were sharing that same concern. And it was a way to kind of talk through and find a community of people and find a voice for a community of people who are maybe in the same place as us. How do we blend these things of social concern and some of the things we're seeing about the unbiblical aspects of fundamentalism and the church's approach to the world, when we talk about the majority church, at least in America? And how do we build a community for that people for good, to make it feel like people belong? And so that's where it started for us.
Yeah, I mean, they say that like with your podcast, a lot of times like your audience in a lot of ways mirrors you. Like,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times over the thinking about it now, it's kind of wild. Like when we first started the germs of this was like 5 years ago. Like
Right.
our
Right.
lives looked very different back then. And like,
My youngest just turned 5.
yeah, this was pre 2020
Yeah.
with COVID and the insurrection and all of
Yeah.
that. Like
Yeah.
pre all of that. And honestly, for us, like, not that fundamentalism wasn't being questioned, but we were just in a different like we were 5 years earlier in our journey
Yeah.
of spiritual maturity and life and all that. And I've really enjoyed seeing, like, I can't tell you how many messages and comments and emails, like hearing from other people who are in that boat. So I mean, that has meant a lot to me,
Yeah.
even in the chapter that we've had so far, of like being able to have as the brand that we were shooting for, like a substantive discussion, a place for like real talk, not just a place for like
Yeah.
venting anger or like
Pat,
clickbaity hot topics,
or like Pat answers, Jesus Juki takes. Like, we
Yeah.
really wanted to look hard information in the face and deal with sources and deal with, like, you know what I mean? We wanted to put something together produced well that also had like really good thinking behind it, not just two dudes you never heard of spouting off at the mouth.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, because to answer your question of why, what brought about this decision, like the substance, especially in its season 2 restart, really existed for me in a time and space where there was kind of a lot of natural circumstances that made a very clear space for the podcast to exist. So a good like reason for it to exist and a space for it to exist in my life. You know what I mean? Like it was almost like it was an outlet for me, you know, in some ways. And as COVID kind of died down and life restarted in ways, as work
Sure.
brought me to a new place, as kids got involved in school and there was a new move and church restarted, and I started getting involved more in church, all along the way over the last, I'd say, man, this summer it's coming up. I've been in Texas for, if I'm doing my math right, I believe 2 years coming up this
That's
summer.
wild.
Yeah.
It feels like you kind of just left Kansas City.
Doesn't
Like
it?
I was talking
Yeah.
with one of our pastor friends not too long ago. He's like, "Man, how's Trev? I miss that guy." And like, I was like, "Yeah, dude, yeah, he's doing good, this and that." And it was just like, because you have been a part of my life forever. And we visited you and we FaceTime, like we chat, we talk, we do this every week or
Yeah.
every so often
Yeah.
to record, to release biweekly. Like you've been like we've still been a constant, but it's like, no, you've been gone. You've been building your life in Texas for 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
And your life is different than it was here.
it sure is. And like the thing is, I come back to what you were saying earlier about commitment. Like I really, as the editor of the podcast as well as one of the hosts, like commitment has been a hard part of, this journey, right? This whole time, because
Let me say shout out to you right now. Like I have gotten so many compliments from other people, some of them who like are podcasting editors and like people who really know their stuff. Like, your guys' show sounds good. Like, it sounds expensive. Like, what do you guys do? I was like, I don't know, Trevor. He's great. Like,
$200 USB microphones with pop filters on a drum stand. Sorry, I'm giving away the secret sauce here with
and whatever your
compression
Apple
applied to
program
Logic
is.
Pro. Yeah.
Logic Pro. But I mean,
The
like,
end.
you make it sound good, and whatever you do, I'm gonna need to freaking figure something out. No, but like that is work. Not only do you have to prep for the show, take the hour out, 60, 90 minutes
Yeah.
to record, do intros, outros, buffers, whatever. And then you have to
Yeah.
edit on top of that.
And I think that's
And
the
thank
thing.
God we're not a weekly show anymore.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the reason we went from weekly to bi-weekly, was just as other commitments squeezed in, as other things kind of continue to come up in life, and there was new priorities and new things with being involved in our community here and getting plugged into the community here. um it really meant that I had to find new ways to continue to make the time for the podcast. And so
Sure.
that's part of the reason we did that. And also along the way, one of the things that's kind of really behind the scenes is like I had to get faster at editing. I mean, the time I take on editing an episode now versus the time I take on like episode 12.
A real perfectionist, and you used to craft the heck out of them.
I would
and it
spend
still sounds
a
amazing.
lot of time. Yeah. I would rearrange, like, people don't, like, we were unapologetically an edited show, and it wasn't, to me, editing was part of the creation process. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, we could almost do the whole thing on that, but I don't want to. But like, I would rearrange whole conversations, you know, if I felt like it made it flow better, if I felt like it was actually truer to the truth of the conversation we're bringing out, that I would listen better. Like, I would rearrange it, you know, if we got to an intro point that would help somebody understand material in the 40th minute, I'd move it and I would cut it out and I would move it to the 15th minute, so that by the time people got it, you know, into that other material, they had already heard that intro point, you know, instead of it being at the end. You know, over time, some of that stuff had to go, just to make more time and make sure that I could still uphold the commitment. And so, yeah, I think we just finally got to a point in life where really to be involved in my community the way I want to, in a way, like, there are people who will have substantive conversations on Christian topics in the podcast world, but, you know, not in the same way. It's not as easy for the worship pastor at my local church to find, you know, subs for worship leading, or there's only so many guys, like, there's guys in the church who are on the preaching team. I get to, you know, I'm blessed to be a part of that team.
And thanks for sending me the new one the other day. Do you want us to? Is that just, you want to throw those in the show notes maybe for the final?
Yeah, people are, I guess, welcome to. I've never really. I think one thing we've always done with the shows, we've never really tied our church into it, just in case the church didn't agree with everything that we said on here. But I mean,
we went through that already.
Yeah,
we don't want to do that again.
But no, I mean, if somebody's super curious, DM Philip.
If somebody really wants to see Trevor's
me, I won't see it for another year.
That's true. If you DM Trevor, he may never see it. Sometimes I send him something on Instagram or Twitter.
Sometimes
days go by, and then I'll text him, "Hey, did you see that?" He'd be like, "What?" No, I didn't. What is that joke? I don't know what that is. I was going, no, I just.
That's why they have
You just got to know where to find people.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
You can DM me on the Substance accounts, and
so
I'll see it. I'll respond.
But anyway, you know, that's the ultimate answer of why, is just, you know, for the family, for the community, for, you know, all the things that I really feel like the Lord is calling me to spend my time in, that just ultimately edged out from a priority standpoint, doing this awesome work and hanging out, you know, with you, the listeners, as cool as it is. You know, I'll still be around. I can interact on social media, things like that. And obviously, any listeners in town, this probably means that I'll be spending more time with you. So you're probably stoked.
And I mean, Trevor still exists. We're still very close. Whatever I figure out going forward,
yeah,
I'm sure with the networking, and I'll be like, "Hey, Trevor, I got so and so coming on." Like, you may hear Trevor as a guest host in the future, perhaps.
I'm sure my arm could be twisted to participate on a.
Oh, you don't have to, but I mean, like, but if I get some super dope guests that I know you love, I'm gonna
speaking tongue in cheek, anyhow.
Be like, surprise, Trevor.
But yeah, anyway, so
I'm sure I'll hear about the editing from Trevor when he's out. He'd be like, good job, sucker.
And the thing about me too that needs editing is like how long-winded I am. on answers.
Well, hey man,
sometimes.
this episode is actually all yours. So I don't. Sometimes I'm like, hey Trev, I need to hit the hand raise button on the record session. And be like, gotta say. But this episode is about you.
about
So yeah, I think anybody. I think that's a good picture of where you are. I think anybody who has listened for any amount of time with any empathy, yeah, that makes total sense. And I'm excited for all the other things. Like the podcast is a real thing, and it's always awesome to hear about the real good things that it does. But we've always said, like, this isn't your local church.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't the end all be all, and we're not chasing like we want to build a good platform to do something good, but the goal isn't to like, hey, check out our
podcast
platform
superstars.
that we built. Aren't we so great? Like, it's been an interesting line sometimes with some of the things we've got to do. Like, it's so interesting. Like in our real life conversation, you'd be like, oh, what are you up to? What are your hobbies?
Yeah.
Oh, I heard you have a podcast. And we're like, yeah, like we just got to talk to Esau McCulley. Almost nobody knows who that is. But like, the people that do, they'd be like, oh, wow. Like, really?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, for real. Yeah, we've had like Jamar Tisby and Karen Swallow Pryor and Propaganda. It's like, whoa, wow. Like,
there's this lady I love in my church, and when she found out that we had Robert P. Jones on, she was like, oh my goodness, you talked to Robert P. Jones. I can't believe. She would like multiple weeks would come up, I can't believe that you talked to, like, literally be like, like, you know what I mean? 2 weeks later from the first time that I mentioned it, she'd be like, I still can't believe that you talked.
I mean, honestly, for me, like, we've talked to so many people that have meant a lot to me over the course of my life, but I remember, like, he was an early one. I feel like he was on episode maybe even 20.
Yeah, it was in the 20s, I think.
For me, because I'm the guy who pushes and grows the show. Like, I'm the
promo director.
Yeah. I run all the social media. I have all the relationships with the publishers and the people who send us books and try to get their authors on the show, stuff like that. I heard, and you did too, like we heard Robert P. Jones like talking to Terry Gross, and we're like, hey, you want to talk to us? And I'm sure COVID helped that he's just sitting at home, but it's like,
I think he was 19 actually.
Episode 19. That's crazy. But I remember when I got the email from, I think it was him directly, not even his team, going, yeah, I'd love to talk to you guys. And I made a joke, like a self-deprecating joke, and he's like, yeah, like Terry Gross's like audience is important, because he was just on Fresh Air.
Yeah.
But it's like your guys' audience, like the conservative church, like, because that's where we were coming out of. It's like they need to hear this.
That's
like,
and what a great heart, like, to, you know, people.
It's not like, oh, you're this piddly new show on episode 19 that nobody's ever heard of.
That's the thing. Like, I was reading something the other day. I was reading in Gospel Comes to the House Key, and Rosaria Butterfield was talking about her testimony some, and how she wanted to be, this was before she was saved, but how she wanted to be honest and respectful in her scholarship. Like, she wanted to write a book on how the religious right was, you know, wrong and backwards about, you know, the LGBT movement or whatever. And to do that, like, she wanted to connect with a pastor, and she respected and took seriously her opponents, like, intellectually, and that actually ended up leading her to faith in Christ. And like, I think that there's some common grace, and out there in the media, like, it's really easy to like create these caricatures on both sides of, you know, of people and their intentions. And it's like, here's a guy who just genuinely wants to connect with people he thinks will be helped by his message.
Like, or even like the what can you offer me? Like, not in a crummy way. Like, Trevor's talking about things on his time. Like, I've had that before because I'm out pushing it all the time. I've done plenty of other people's shows, but sometimes someone will be like, hey, can you come on my show? And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. Like, yeah. And I'm nobody, but he was just like, yeah, there's this huge platform, important book. And so anyway, I don't even know how we got on that tangent.
I don't know. It's just interesting. We were talking about
the lady in your church, like how our real lives intersect with the podcast.
So funny.
I love that.
It's always fun, and it is. It's always been interesting. People are like, when people ask, "Oh, what do you do outside of work?" And it's like, well, you know, I've got 2 kids and a wife, and go to church, and yeah, I guess, you know, I have a podcast. Well, you have a podcast, you know?
I kind of downplay. So you're introvert, working on the computer a lot. I'm in sales and marketing. I do a ton of networking. Like, when the podcast comes up, I'm like, yeah, I have a podcast, because the joke's like, oh, everybody's got a podcast, and like, but yeah, we're in the 100s, and we've been doing it for a long time, but still, like, because I'm in the professional settings I'm in. Sometimes I don't want to get into like super huge like faith and politics discussions like at a happy hour event. So like, oh, what are you? Someone's like, oh, someone told me you had a podcast. Yeah, the last one we did was your apolitical church is really political. That was a great guy. Like, I'm not trying to break that out on the at Top Golf when we're talking about our businesses.
Yeah, you're in like some hypersensitive PC work environment. Yeah, check out our latest episode on sexual ethics.
Yeah.
But you probably should, though.
You should. You probably have.
Probably have if you listen to this. We appreciate it.
So looking back, I mean, I would like to briefly, like, how would you, because I feel like we maybe even did this at episode like 100, maybe, kind of looking back, like, what are your reflections? And I know you haven't maybe had a whole lot of lead time on this, but reflections from back in 2018 when we were brainstorming to now. How do you think we did? How do you think you've done? Like, for what you set out to do and what we set out to do. I remember we met at your house a bunch. We met a couple times at a coffee shop, just sketching it out. How do you think we did with what we set out to do with the Substance podcast?
I think we've done well, at least. I mean, it's hard to say, oh, we've done really well or whatever. Like, of course, I think so, but yeah, like I think we achieved what we were setting out to do, which was to bring a perspective that was fresh and biblical and relevant, but yet timeless on things that were going on. And I think we've hit that in ways where, as topics come up, I think about, honestly, this is silly, but like our episode on swearing, and like I've gone back to that. Like it was a well researched, really well thought out and timeless episode like that. And I think for a lot of our episodes, and maybe nearly all of our episodes, have these things that I keep going back to, these thoughts that we formed along the way and we're able to put out there. And so it ends up being a resource, where you're able to go back. And our systemic racism episode, like if you have somebody in your life who's like questioning whether that's even a real thing, like I'd recommend that as a resource to anybody. Like it's very accessible. It's very winsome. Like it doesn't assume everybody already agrees with the premise, and it presents fairly, I would say, just reasoned out things. You know what I mean? So I like when I thought about the Substance and what we wanted to do, it was like we wanted to have the kind of conversations that anybody, whether Christian or non-Christian, would want to have about the church and about things in the church, but you would never see necessarily talked about in Sunday school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was part of the thing that we wanted to do. It wasn't the whole thing, right? We want us to talk about movies, but I think that fits in, because movies bring up the different topics and present the information in different and fresh ways.
Well, in books too, yeah, like truth. Not,
and it
not
was
like
us,
like in a bullheaded, like closed-minded way, but it's like truth and beauty.
Yeah.
Like what is true? What is good? Like, and like specifically, like how does that relate to the important things that are shaping our culture?
Yeah. I think both the pastors at my church had listened to our manipulative servant tactics episode as an example. So that's a funny one. Actually, that's what he was like. He's like, I said a Greek word up there. I'm like, that's okay.
That's funny.
You weren't using it in a manipulative way, so it's fine.
That's funny. Wow. So, okay. The next, maybe like looking back, I know you mentioned some of the guests, and feel free to share any specific reflections there, but whether it's guests, whether it's books we've looked at, authors we've talked to, reflects, topic toss-ups, like what are some of the episodes or segments that really stick out to you as impactful, important, like forming for yourself?
Yeah.
Maybe feedback you've gotten. I know you read all the emails. I'm more of the social media DMs guy, but like, what are some of the standout episodes in our 125 episode run?
Yeah. When I think about some of our standout episodes, I think we had a lot that were really rich conversations, and then we had even some that like surprised me. Like y'all, Philip's out here on social media. He's connecting with all sorts of people. I've never heard of these folks. Like this is just real talk. And it's awesome. Like Philip is excited about something that they're doing or something
A
that he's
spiritual
seeing.
gift.
Yeah. And so he's kind of like not just promoting that in the substance, but he's kind of promoting it internally as well. Um to me. And I think that there's definitely cases where I'm blown away by our conversation. You know, as far as the folks that I was really excited to get and it exceeded my expectations, like, I mentioned Kyle Strobel at the top, and his just to talk with him is almost to encounter shepherding, it feels like, you know?
Yeah. Those were both very like, I mean, and we've talked about this before, but both of those episodes were very just like
Yeah.
almost like little like mini therapy sessions. And like they were
For
very
real.
ministerial and very like I felt very ministered to at the end of those
Yeah.
conversations. I've gone back and re-listened to them, and they're rich and they're tender and they're sweet. They're very wonderful episodes.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm thinking about episodes we really had like just a fun time with guests. Hannah
We've had some
Hannah
great
Chow
guests.
over from Sola Network. I'm just kind of scrolling through our guests.
Nice.
Like that was fun. Like the couple
And
episodes
you
we
would
required with
have
them.
never known who she was.
No, super great. Our conversation with Eric Nevins too was like a like surprise hit for me.
Yeah, I remember you're like, who is this guy, Philip?
Yeah, like,
he
what do
runs your Christian podcasting group. Like, okay.
What? Okay. Neat. So yeah, and if these were ones that maybe listeners weren't familiar with and had skipped, like go back and check those out. Like we had
That
really
Eric one was really
fun
good.
conversations with those folks. And there's others I could say for sure, but I think you get the idea. The other guest I would say just to shout out was one of our earliest like aspirational guests. We were like, man, we'll have achieved everything we want to almost with the substance if we get this guest on. And that was Brett McCracken early on, right? It was like
that was our first guest.
yeah, and like it was amazing because didn't he say yes before we even had anything out on the feed?
Well, because I have had a relationship with him for a long time on the like Facebook. Like I used to read his things and email him feedback like way back in the day.
Yeah,
And so I emailed him before we launched saying, "Hey man, we're doing a new podcast. Eventually we're going to start doing like a series of them looking at movies called Substantive Cinema. And we think that we'll probably do Tree of Life early on. And I know you love it. We'd love it." And he's like, "Yeah, I'd love to talk about Terrence Malick." And likely, if nothing has fallen through, we'll have added one more and we will have had 4 Terrence Malick episodes and then Minari. So we'll have had 5 movie episodes with Brett McCracken likely by the time this airs.
very generous with us with his time. It's been pretty awesome. And the other one I was just thinking of, one of our favorite Christian podcasts, one of the best produced Christian podcasts, if not the best produced Christian podcast out there, was Love Thy Neighborhood, is Love Thy Neighborhood, and the Indiacast. And when Jesse Eubanks said yes to come on, and how just kind he has been to us, to the show, caring.
We got to return the favor recently.
Yeah, we talked about his book. He came on talking about his book. It was really awesome. But like, that to me was just, it meant a lot. That
do you remember when we first got
the way he's cared? Yeah,
Jesse was one of the first ones to on his main feed, because usually people will either tweet or share in their Instagram stories, "Hey, I was a guest on The Substance."
Yeah,
he was the first person to like post the show on his main feed.
Yes,
and like he's a guy you and I have appreciated since episode 1 of Love Thy Neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a guest, parade where we get them all, because if it gets super long, then it's like, well, who are we leaving out? And that's not fair. But I did want to shout out Jesse, because just how kind he's been to the show. and to us and cared about us as individuals, not just as a podcast, like in the messages that we've got behind the scenes. So yeah, just big shout out to him, and may the Lord continue to bless the work that he's involved in over there at Sojourn and at Love Thy Neighborhood. He's doing great work out there. And I think honestly, one of the most early influences in my thinking, in my Christian thinking, would be him in that show.
Oh yeah,
You know, because like when I first saw
that
some
whole
of
like
his
biblical,
episodes,
thoughtful human. Like we didn't steal that from them, but like that ethos that like having it be biblical,
Mhm.
but also very thoughtful and like truly human. Like
yeah,
that is definitely us being disciples of kind of their model a little
yeah,
bit.
because like when I first saw their episodes of like where the gospel meets homelessness, which if you never listened to that episode over at Love of Thy Neighborhood, do yourself a favor, cue that up right after this. But like my thought going into it before I'd listened to a minute of it was like, let's see what these liberals think, you know? Back then before I owned that label. You know? And like,
Yeah.
let's see how these progressive guys, you know, kind of fudge on the gospel. But then you listen to them, they're rock solid, conservative Bible interpreting, like, and believing Christians who just, I don't know, have read the parts of the Bible that says that we should care for our neighbors and love them, and like actually think about the situations that means and what it would mean to take action on it. Like, it was just super convicting ultimately, and showed me a different way to do biblical, like a Bible centered ministry. Like, to steal a phrase from a late friend would be doing God's business God's way, you know. It showed me a different way to approach that whole mindset.
No, that's really good. So what about, I mean, I know you talked a little bit about Kyle, especially.
Mhm.
Is there any like lessons or nuggets? I know you said you went back to the cursing one as well, but like, what are
Shoot.
are there any particular topics where like in preparing for those episodes, whether it be a reflex or a topic toss up or like an interview or a film, where you felt like, oh no, like I really learned and grew through preparing for and or doing that episode?
Yeah, I think one that sticks out to me is Kyle Strobel's book on prayer, and just reading that, and um, some of what he was saying about how we get in our own heads on prayer, and it's like prayer becomes in our minds, like we're almost holding up a mirror to ourselves in it, and we're trying to make sure we look good as we're doing it, even if we pray privately, you know.
Yeah.
That there's ways that we approach prayer in that way, instead of coming to God in full honesty. And like one example he gave was like the way we beat ourselves up over our minds wandering in prayer. Um, and he's like, well, your mind wandering in prayer is actually just a indicator of where your heart and mind is really at. And that's really where you are in that moment. And you need to bring that to God too. And so like beating ourselves up over it is actually a form of us basically saying, we're basically reinforcing to ourselves that prayer is a kind of this right action that we need to conform to, and make sure we get it exactly right, rather than a conversation with God. And so it's actually funny that in doing that, we actually are kind of, in a way, getting away from the essence of what prayer is. And that, just some of those insights there, just, really blew me away, and are things that the reason why it's almost hard to answer it as like something that I've really learned is that I'm still learning it. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that I don't feel like I've applied that really well. I feel like I've got a ways to go on the journey from that. But yeah, that's the one that sticks out to me the most.
I know that you probably read and listen to audiobooks more than I do, and I do the movie thing more than you do. What would you say are maybe of the authors we've interviewed or the movies we've covered, maybe standouts? I don't want to say favorites because like we've covered a lot of great stuff. I
Mhm.
genuinely don't think other than maybe Interstellar. We haven't really covered any duds. JK.
Dude, wasn't Interstellar one of our best performing Substance cinemas?
No.
It's not.
It had a really good it had a really good first week or two, but it I don't know if it had the legs of some of our others because it didn't have guests.
Did we do Inception?
We did do Inception.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Well, I blame that on you anyway. But no, to answer your question,
books and films that we've covered that are particularly fond experiences, or
I'll give you one of each.
Okay.
Reading While Black.
Golly, how great was that conversation?
Yeah, we had Isama Koli on to talk about Lent, and actually that book's really good too. But Reading While Black was one that I listened to and I read twice. So I listened to it once, I read the book twice. Once on a digital copy.
I listened to it twice.
I've taken it in like 3 different media forms because I listened to it, I read it in a digital form, and then I have the physical book and I read it and marked it up.
Jeez.
It's been super impactful. And it's something that really helped me see the Bible in fresh ways. That was been really good. Really, really good for my biblical interpretation. Really good for my growth as a student of the Word and as a follower of Jesus. So that's one. I don't know how to give that book any more of a ringing endorsement for you guys out there. Go get Reading While Black. We've had it
was so good.
On discounts forever. I think you can probably still get it from one discount or another through IVP, right? They probably have something up there, even if it's not from us. But yeah, go get that. So film, and the film that sticks out to me and it always comes back, that I come back to, that I would not have watched had it not been for the show. Let me give you 2, actually. And
I'm so excited. Okay,
Let me give you 2 because they go together in ways. They're both Malik. Tree of Life and a Hidden Life.
Nice.
Those 2 films, because Tree of Life really helped me to see kind of this way of communicating without language.
Yeah, it's a very non-standard cinematic experience that the general public, like, it didn't perform well with the general public.
Yeah.
So there's no reason that you would have even known it existed.
Yeah. And I think it gave me a different idea of what a Christian film could be.
Yes.
And it makes me contemplate. Like it really makes you meditate, honestly. But the first one I was gonna say, first and foremost, was A Hidden Life.
Nice.
And A Hidden Life is powerful. I mean, it's just so powerful. It's accessible. And our quote that we have on our Hidden Life episode, where we run some movie audio at the beginning, that whole section about I paint a what does he say?
Comfortable
Christ. Yeah. Wow.
Is that what it is?
We'll play it right now. The magic of editing, you never know. I gotta clear my throat.
You can even drop it in there. You can even drop it in this episode if you wanted to get fancy with
just
it.
Get more editing. When did we do Hidden Life? Before Minari.
On our relaunch.
Before Minari. Before Interstellar.
No, it was our first
Hidden Life. There it is.
It was our first one in our relaunch.
6. Here it is. Here we go.
I paint the tombs of the prophets. I help people look up from those pews and dream. They look up and they imagine that if they lived back in Christ's time, they wouldn't have done what the others did. They would have murdered those whom they now adore. I paint all this suffering that I don't suffer myself. I make a living of it. What we do is just create sympathy. We create admirers. Don't create followers. Christ's life is a demand. We don't want to be reminded of it. So we don't have to see what happens to the truth. Darker time is coming. And men will be more clever. They won't fight the truth. So just ignore it. I paint their comfortable Christ with a halo over his head. How can I show what I haven't lived? Someday I might have the courage to venture. Not yet. Someday I'll paint the true Christ.
About to watch this again tonight.
Okay. That line right there where he says, you know, I paint the tombs of the prophets, which for a biblically like literate person calls your mind immediately to Matthew 23. You know, woe to you Pharisees, whitewashed tombs. Like they paint, you paint the tombs of the prophets, you decorate them. And you think, you know, had I lived in that time, and he's literally directly taking that and putting it into the words of this painter's mouth in not like Nazi occupied Austria. And he says they look up from those pews and they imagine that if they had lived in their time, in the saints' time, they wouldn't have done as the others did. And that's it. I mean, that is exactly the sentiment that paralyzes the church against fascist forces, both then and now. And it's such a powerful line, and it's literally scripture. And it actually in film it exposits that text. Exactly. I mean,
without being by being a beautiful film and telling such a wrenching human like true story.
Yeah, exactly. And
without being like a sermonette and like a clunky like, and then they found Jesus and everything was cool.
Right. And I mean, it's that same truth that we found in books like White Too Long with Robert P. Jones and other things. Like, it's really just applications of Matthew 23, but like to see it in there and hear it and it put in this context of this painter who's painting the tombs, the prophets, he's saying like, it's, yeah. And he does talk about the comfortable Christ in that section. Anyway, just go watch the film. It's amazing. I could go on and on about it.
I'm so glad to hear that. I'm glad you liked that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Sorry we didn't get your boy Eric Foner before he was done doing interviews. That was a bummer.
Hey,
that was one I was trying to get for you.
It's all right. It's all right. Maybe one of these days you'll get Eric Foner. You know, maybe he'll have some time on his hands and decide he wants to maybe do another interview or two, and you invite me back on. Yeah, I mean, the Reconstruction time is such a really interesting time in American history, and so many like different spiritual lessons and like formative to the place where we minister and live today. And so like he's America's like expert on that time. He also consulted for one of my favorite like war/history movies, Free State of Jones, which is funny. Like,
oh, he did?
Mm-hmm. He was the history consultant for that movie. Yeah. You know what's funny is like sometimes I'll be driving back and forth on I-10 through Mississippi, and you go through Pascagoula, and every time we go into it, I say to the car, "We're entering the Free State of Jones."
Does your wife
every
just
time
love that every time?
Every time, yeah. She knows who she married.
Oh, well, is there anything else? Like, what do you imagine truly in like 6 months from now? What do you think it's going to look like here?
Oh,
do you think I will have no idea. Made a mess of it?
I have no idea. You know,
I'm not even sure.
I think you have options, man. Like, I
do.
I think you will do something, you know, that makes sense for you that you want to do with it. And I have no idea what that'll look like, but I'll say this. I'll say this on there because I really believe this. I don't think you've hit your ceiling in the podcast world. Like, I think the levels to which that this format jives with you and your skill set and your ability to network, like, I think that there is a lot of great work in this space that you have left to do, and I think your ceiling in this space is in a way a lot higher than mine, and not necessarily to be comparative in a negative way, but I honestly think that you've got skills and talents that have even yet to be fully realized and fully tapped in this space. So that's my thought on
Thanks,
that.
man.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Hey, no worries.
Like, life's just been a busy time. My youngest just had a birthday. My grandma's having health issues, work. Like, I have been in the back of my head going like, I know I need to really brainstorm. Like, I don't want to. It's nice that we're bi-weekly.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some in the can, but this will ostensibly be your final episode with you. So I've got a couple lined up for just me to record, but then I need to figure out what to do with those recordings. And then actually like a game plan going forward of what's it going to be? What's the format? What's it going to look like?
Do you want all that on there?
I just haven't had the time. I don't care.
Okay, cool.
I just haven't had the time to sit down with like a cup of coffee and a notepad and like actually sketch that out. So listeners, if anyone listens in real time, they can be praying for just the wisdom in that. Because like if asking somebody to join you in a podcasting endeavor is not a small thing.
For sure.
The way we do it, a lot of people like fart out after 6 episodes and don't keep doing it. But like thinking about, okay, like what would I want in a co-host? Do I want to run a solo show? Not necessarily, but like if I have a co-host, golly, like I don't know anyone else that I've known my whole life.
Yeah.
That I'm a great fit with. So like I just gotta figure that crap out.
For sure. I know that whatever you figure out and on whatever timeline it takes to get things settled, like I think the sky's the limit and I think people would do well to pay attention.
I appreciate that, man. So I guess here shout outs. Just kidding.
I think when
Trevor's least favorite segment. Like we introduced that in episode like 4 or 5.
No,
I was like, oh, Trevor, this would be a cool thing.
I actually think
to
it was
do.
episode 11 that we
was
introduced.
It that far?
I think it was, yeah.
I knew it was in our.
It was in season 1,
era.
but it was towards the end of season 1 that we did that, and
I got really excited about it because honestly, as a new show that nobody knew about, I'd be like, we can tag all these people on our posts
exactly
and engage with
like,
it.
I don't know, man. Like I'm not really. I don't know.
It wasn't just that, but also like send our listeners. Here's a cool book.
I've never not
album.
Struggled with it. I've never. I don't know if listeners, probably longtime listeners of the show, have that very well known. But I've never not struggled with that particular segment, which is our only segment.
And the other episodes we have left to record of your run, those are guest episodes. So your shout outs are done. You are safe.
Boom. Safe slid into home. Made it.
Any final reflections, man?
I do have reflections, and like I guess what I want people to, like, if I left anything out there, like in the episodes that we talked about, like the 120 something episodes out there, like what are some of the key things that I would love people to take away from that time and like walk away with? And I think it's really that, I mean, the Bible's true, and because of that, it matters a lot, the world that we live in. Like it matters to know what's going on and how the Bible interacts with that. And I think we've always wanted to think through things and not just take the culture that we were handed. And that's the thing, is like we've always felt like in the church the culture is presented as something out there that's different from the church. And we fail to realize how the church that we're familiar with itself is a culture that's handed to us that may or may not be biblical and needs to be challenged. And I think that's an idea that when I present to Christians, they usually are like, "Whoa, I didn't think of it that way." But I think that that's one of the main things I try to think of. And the other thing is that like we have to think of the where of the church. You know, where are we? What is its history? Who are the people of our community? You know, why do we draw the lines the way that we do? Is that right? What does that imply for what we are likely to struggle with sin-wise? What does it imply about what ideologies we might be quick to imbibe? You know, whether that's nationalism, patriotism, racism, um, you know, other things, whether it's, loose sexual morals, whether it's, you know, loose loose morality around our language, whether it's whatever, like what about our culture is causing us to, because of the air we breathe, not see, the things that we're used to, and how can we be more aware of those by understanding our history, understanding our place, understanding the people around us, and then how do we administer to that, right? How do we care about that? And I think that's what we've always tried to do here, right? Like that's why we always come back to the theology of place. That's why we always come back to the love of neighbor and things like that, because we are embodied people. Like that is, you know, that's essential to how God made us.
Yeah, I feel like the theology of place playlist would be like 100 of our 100 or more. Like
Yeah.
that is something. I feel like that's maybe the biggest through line.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Because like, oh yeah. I mean, we've talked like social justice and like that was a big thing, but I really think a lot of it does go
Yeah.
back to like being embodied people, not just souls trying to be purified or
Exactly.
intellectual theological beings trying to get like the most correct thoughts.
Yeah.
Like an embodied life.
Because I think that's the thing. Like, and the church, as I've experienced it, like the things that I felt like needed biblical correction were the ways that we view ourselves detached from the place that we're in.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, we lose any biblical critique on our culture, any biblical critique on, for example, suburbia, on industrialization, on capitalism, on
Oh
the way
yeah.
we practice democracy, to like all of these things. Like we, the church either like just considers its people, like you said, like disembodied souls that, we can just refine our thoughts into glory, instead of actual human beings that
Yeah.
are a whole person that needs sanctification, or B, like you just really live an unexamined life, like just don't think about this stuff. And like I just think that the biblical truth is important enough to apply to all of these things, because if we just don't think about the world, if that's a, you know what I mean, if like that is something that the church is committed to, that like we don't really need to think about all this stuff that goes on in the world and the systems and everything. Like, basically what we do is we give the enemy a guaranteed tool against the church, right? Like a unopposed tool against the church. Like, oh well, if you just go ahead
Yeah,
and
exactly.
introduce all of these evils through systems over time, then all the church is pre-committed to not thinking about the way their society's run. So
Yikes.
like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And I know
we've
that,
had
like,
those conversations with people.
and I know it's hard because it feels intellectual and it feels abstract and etc. But like, no, like when you really start to think about some of these things, they really do impact how you practice your faith. Like whether or not we take care of low wage workers impacts how those people in particular, will be able to serve in churches, which impacts how you'll be able to take care of the needy in your church, which impacts your witness to the world. Like, you know what I mean? Like these things have impacts that matter. And we can't just sweep all of it under the rug and say, pray, read your Bible, and get involved here, until we're blue in the face, and just ignore everything that's going on around us, because the Lord put us somewhere.
See, if we had a soundboard, that's would be where like you'd clap and have the hype man going right there. That's what's up.
And so that's what we mean by place. Like God put us somewhere, and that somewhere has a history, has systems that affect it, has government, has politics, has community, has all of these things pre-existing, and it matters to you as a believer, because that's why you're there and not just everywhere, so anyway, I think that is the key concepts that I think that I'd love people to take away from it, is that where you are matters, and these systems and everything that we like to just let be in the background, dig into them, and I'd say at the end of the day, and this is something that I've just really recently been confronted by in the text myself, so I'm preaching myself right here, is don't let it get you down, though.
For sure.
God's in control of it. God is doing wonderful things. And even though even some of the stuff, Phil, we talk about on the podcast that's like super dark and like, sometimes depressing. We're talking about, hey, we get this wrong. But there's so much that the Lord is doing through, what is it? They say God uses bent sticks to make straight lines.
Sure.
God uses broken people to do the work of his healing. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't think through it and do better, but it also means that we serve a powerful God who is bigger than our failures, and that should be a reason for hope.
Amen. Well, man, it's been a really good run here with you.
Thanks, bro. I really appreciate all the time I've had with you, and listeners, I appreciate all the time that you've come by and listened to us think through stuff. And
if listeners want to send Trevor any final messages or DMs or emails, send them to me. I'll make sure that they get over to
I'd love
them.
to, and if you want
encouragements, words of thanks, whatever.
Twitter is great too. Like, I'm sure you'll put up like a.
You're still on Twitter?
I definitely check Twitter. Yeah, like you'll have a Twitter episode. Like, I'd love if people are still on it. But yeah, if you want to send anything one off, like, send them the Substance. I'll still get them.
Nice.
You can contact the Substance at the Substance Pod.
Yeah, let's transition.
gmail.com.
No, the Substance is still gonna go. So yeah, substancepod@gmail.com. Trevor, I don't have it off the top. You want to hit them with the voicemail if they want to?
Yeah, you want to leave. I mean, you can always record a voice note and email it.
Yeah, maybe
which is
record
fine.
A voice note and send it to the email is the best way.
But you can call our phone line, leave a voice message at 913-703-3883.
Boom. Tell a friend. This might be a weird one to show them. Maybe pick one of our past guest episodes that we've mentioned previously. If you're texting to a friend, it'd be out of the blue. Hey, this podcast I like, one of their hosts is leaving. You should listen to this one first. Without knowing their show at all. Why not? If that happens, let us know. Tell us what they say.
I would love to hear, what you found compelling about it. Like, that would be great. Yeah, we did summarize some stuff. Maybe it's a good way to get into it in that way.
Hey, man,
if you're new here,
that's what I always told you. I was probably annoying with you with the Stan Lee rule when we first started. I was like, hey, man, every episode it's gonna be somebody's first episode. We need to make it a hook and not just like, obviously we're gonna build, like, the nature of our show is we build on the ideas, but each episode's got to be standalone.
We and if hopefully listeners realize, and that's why you're here, that like this, we've always been super intentional. Like, it's never been just get in front of a mic, hit record, and see what happens. Like, there's always been a plan. Even sometimes if it's a last minute plan, there's always been a plan, and there's always been like really like clear guiding lights and principles for the kind of experience we wanted to create. And so just appreciate y'all going along with us on the journey, even if that journey has just been for the last hour or so.
I wasn't going to mention support, but if you guys want to support the show,
sure.
Cash App at $the Substance Pod or at the anchor link in the show notes. I was going to try to get some press passes to cover South by Southwest next year, so I thought I could come see it.
Hey, there you go.
I'm in town for that.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
That's a little bit of culture and Trevor, and if I could, depending on where it is, if I could crash, I could save some money. See the fan.
You could probably crash at my place and then take the train down to downtown and
heck yeah,
either transfer to a bus.
That's wild that Texas is working on some public transportation.
I could go long on Texas.
We're late. We can talk about that later.
Hey, believers should care about all the things about where they're at, including
I'm sure
the transit versus highway oriented development.
No, I think we'll talk about public transit probably in the future if we stay on a regular schedule, which I hope we do.
Yeah. The type of development in your city matters for your church.
So this is going late.
I just want to tell people that.
After our apolitical episode?
Yeah.
Maybe. We mentioned something about city planning, and I had a listener reach out saying, "Hey, like I know a city planner that like has done like really important work. If you want to talk to him, so we may have a line on that."
Yeah, that's really cool
for the listeners or you.
Yes, love that.
Or cut that out because we're running long.
Whatever.
Well, I guess 10 minutes of that was nothing at the beginning before we actually recorded.
True.
Anyway, man, love ya. I'm not really gonna miss you, but I'm gonna miss you on here every week.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Once again, my name's Trevor saying so long.
And I'm Philip saying see you next time
on The Substance.
No, I'm racking my brain. I don't have a
team me up for any. Or did you want to leave that for the end? Any final reflections?
Yeah,
on the time?
We're not going to do shout outs.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
That
was going to be my last request.
I was going to make a joke. I might still do that. Just be like, all right, Trevor, shout outs. Like, oh no, not again.
No.
I forgot what I was going to say.